Today, I'm speaking with Wesley Kennedy from the Mullings Group Executive Search down here in South Florida. Wesley has been extensively focused in emerging medtech R&D recruitment with numerous clients in the surgical robotics and growing digital health arena. Wesley, thank you very much for joining me today on this talk.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you for having me here. Really appreciate for putting this together. We've known each other for a while and more different circumstances, but really glad we're able to put this platform together, bring me on, and I appreciate being here.
So Wesley, during this talk, I'll be asking some open-ended and intentionally vague questions to hear all of your thoughts. So with that, let's start the conversation with the very first question. Surgical robotics or self-driving cars?
Absolutely. Industry right now, I would say surgical robotics, mainly because even outside of the robotic applications, there's multitude of different opportunities for different areas of digital health. Autonomous driving is fantastic, and that there's definitely multi-industrial applications, but specifically in surgical robotics and digital health, being able to pivot into different areas, it's a fairly tremendous growing market. I mean, they're talking 2021, I think for digital health, US funding alone was over $30 billion.
It's so good to hear that, Wesley. So now let's take one step back and talk about the Mullings Group. Can you tell us more about the Mullings Group and your role at the organization?
Absolutely. The Mullings Group, for the last 30 years, we've been an executive search firm centered in medtech and life sciences. I've been with the firm for about 6 years. I've been focused, as you know, almost primarily into surgical robotics and more digital health applications. We have expanded into multiple different verticals, everything from primarily search operations, executive search, as well as marketing, digital strategy, and then a lot of which is consultancy. I mean, of that $30 billion in digital medtech funding over the last year, we need to work with a lot of these organizations. We speak with a lot of these organizations, understanding what's the next step. You have a technology, you have $100,000 in seed round funding. What do you do with regulatory? How do you focus on regulatory strategy? What does your clinical trial operations look like? How do you scale a company? Questions like these outside of when we get to a state of, hey, I need a senior C++ engineer.
Next question is South Florida or Silicon Valley when it comes to surgical robotics?
I would say Silicon Valley. There was a period, I love South Florida. I've been here for 20 years. I think in the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, for alternative reasons, the South Florida area has become, I would say, extremely challenging just because of cost of living, the real estate crisis. I think there is some extremely innovative and incredible medical technology that are on the South Florida shores. I just think ultimately, if you have the availability, if you're interested down here in South Florida, fantastic. Please do check it out. It's a great place to be. All things considered, I think now as a 2022 and moving onward, it would still have to be in the Bay Area. I just think there's more access to digital, more access to private equity, to venture capital. There's more access to stronger academic institutions from Berkeley to Stanford and all over. I honestly think they're winning that bout right now. But I mean, Florida is an absolutely beautiful place to live for anybody interested in a medical device career down here.
That's right, but I know some key players in the surgical robotics field are headquartered down here in South Florida, and some self-driving car companies have offices here as well. Can you maybe name some and talk about them?
Sure. What it has been for the last few years, as you probably know, the big two that have always caught people's eye down here was Stryker with Mako Surgical, as well as Magic Eye. That's been put them on the map. There's other Mimic Innovative Surgeries down here, Neosys is down here, and a host of others I'm probably not even recognizing. But I think something that's always been described to me is if you're going to have a tech, regardless of industry, if you're going to have a tech infrastructure, a metropolis, you need the proper academic institutions. University of Miami, Florida International, FAU, they're fantastic schools. But when you look at some of the larger populaces like Boston or the Bay Area or Southern Cal, you have Worcester Polytech, MIT, you have Stanford, Berkeley, Southern Cal, you have USC, you have, even in California, you have Cal Polytech and Harvey Mudd. if you don't have those academic institutions, it's extremely difficult to scale up technical operations. South Florida does a good job as being a multi-geographically diverse location. So if you're looking to bring individuals from overseas, that's a fantastic approach. But it's still where I see an area like Raleigh-Durham flourishing past South Florida is they have Duke, they have NC State, with their extremely renowned medical engineering, medical device, etc. academic programs.
So do you think the main challenge for South Florida is access to talent then?
Very, very possible. It's one major component. I think a big component is where is the private equity? Where is the venture capital? Where is the money that's funding these operations, these technologies? The typical situation, as I would see, is that if you are a private equity or venture capital group, you would look to those universities. What is the newest innovation coming out of MIT or Worcester Poly or Stanford? You get in with these individuals quickly. You become their preferred partner for financing. That's where that equation essentially shapes up to me. For South Florida, it's still there. There is a tremendous amount of money coming in from the New York area that's shifting down here in terms of wealth management, but in terms of, I know it's had somewhat of a resurgence or renaissance in terms of tech for different areas of like crypto and different areas of fintech, but I feel like it's still a few clicks behind, but like a Raleigh-Durham or a Minneapolis or, really any parts of California or Boston.
So going back to the talent issue, we hear a lot about shortage of software engineering talent, especially robotic software engineers down here in South Florida, as well as the entire nation. Is this real? And if it is, how serious is this issue?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a broad range in terms of engineering skill set when you talk about robot. If it's hardware, if it's mechatronics development, subsystem development, if it's primarily software centric, software, you'll have a little bit of an easier time because you can pivot that to primarily remote. And even if you, depending on the resources you have for potential legal sponsorship, you can look abroad. For physical hardware development, if you're actually designing the physical, the robotic arms, the robotic components, that's going to be a different challenge because those individuals have to be inside the robotics lab, or you're literally FedExing a prototype all across the country. It's not impossible. And we have companies seeing that. I know I just spoke to an executive with a medical robotics organization yesterday in the Bay Area, and we were literally pinging ideas on how to recruit individuals out of the Midwest. There's the only way you can be competitive in terms of compensation. And I know it, a strong C++ engineer, Python engineer, bare minimum starting is 180 to 200,000. That's within 2 to 3 years of experience. You want somebody who's staff level, principal level, who can essentially design in terms of architecture, you're looking at 400.
Wow, these are really big numbers and really high compensation packages.
Not sure your bosses want to hear that.
So Wesley, you touched on my favorite topics, hardware engineering versus software engineering. I dabbled between mechanical engineering and software engineering for a while, and a few years ago I decided to completely transition to software engineering, and I couldn't be happier about that decision. So now the question for you is mechanical engineering or computer science?
Computer science. Easily computer science, and just to always have that in your back pocket, because that's always going to be the preferred desired or the most desired skill set. You can keep that as a side hustle if you want to get into part-time consulting. There's always going to be a need, and it's fully remote. Depending on your interest, if you want to be kind of a more holistic systems level engineer, obviously you'd want to understand everything. You'd understand the mechanical engineering, the electrical engineering, the software, everything in regards to mechatronic systems development. The software, I would preface it as the most desired skill set, and that will set you up for success wherever you want to go. Obviously you can do your passion project. If you want to join an organization specifically to build a system, the software will always come into play as one of the most critical components. I don't want to shy away from things like mechanism design or FEA or structural, like machine design, but reality, the critical aspects will be surrounding software, even at a systems level, writing software requirements.
So you briefly mentioned some numbers for robotic software engineers or software engineers in general. So now my question to you is, what's the maximum compensation package that you have offered to a robotic software engineer or a surgical robotics engineer or any other technical role?
So I tell this story often. I admit all names, but looking for C++ engineer with a background in robotic systems design, kinematic analysis, I remember I recruited a 27-year-old in the Bay Area that showed up to an interview on a bicycle and flip-flops, and literally the company stopped. I got emails, my CEO got emails. We're like, do not let this individual leave the building. I think the total number, the offer that came in with the prospected RSU package was upwards of, I want to say 515. This was 2016, mind you. And this still, I mean, I got these numbers are probably seven figures by now in terms of equity. But I remember the offer that our company presented was just a little bit over 500. I believe the offer that won, unfortunately, which was not ours, I think NVIDIA, came in just above 615.
650.
Bonus component was about 300K. I'm sorry, base component was 300K. Bonus component, I believe, was 25 to 30%. And then the equity component was an additional 200,000 I believe on a 3-year vesting cycle. I'm sorry, 200,000 annual, 600,000 total on a 3-year cycle. 6 years ago.
6 years ago. And how many years of experience did that person have?
4.
And what was his background?
Master's in computer science he was overseas, had worked at a FAANG company, had specifically led early software architecture towards a robotics company within a FAANG program, or a robotics program within a FAANG company. And I remember the hiring manager had said something specific. There was tons of interest to be the C++ person on the robotic controls, and they said, look, it's fantastic that you understand C++, syntax and the principles of software development. I don't have another 5 years to teach you the principal natures of inverse forward kinematic for robotic arm development. We're working on a CTO position, just in terms of our discussion for engineering skill set in medtech. We're working on a CTO position in the Bay Area. Imagine the base salary should be somewhere between 3 and 325, probably a 40 to 50% annual bonus, and an equity target if there is a successful acquisition or a successful exit in the next 24 to 36 months. That individual could potentially see a 7-figure payout. In terms of, I would say, the most desired skill sets, and I've probably said this 4 or 5 times, but Python and C++. I know there's depending in terms of cloud infrastructure, or if you really want to get into that, getting into other areas of cloud build or potentially build and release. There's different areas, but I like principal software engineers in the Bay Area, Southern Cal, or Boston. I mean, I would say starting would be 200. The highest that I've seen for an individual contributor software development engineer was, that individual I told you with the flip-flops and the bicycle that they were trying to give over 300K with a 500 total package. I think it's still, a startup's not going to have the capacity to do that. I mean, they're going to offer in different terms, but I mean, you get that call from Netflix, you get that call from Facebook, or honestly, even like an Intuitive Surgical with it in terms of their stock price. I mean, they will go toe to toe and they will pay you in gold bars because they can print their own money.
Wow, these are big numbers. We're talking 400K, 500K, 600K. These are really huge compensation packages. So how can medtech companies even compete with FAANG when it comes to talent acquisition?
You have to establish interest. You know this, and I mean, I know this probably, my estimate, probably 7 or 8 out of 10 engineers, software engineers, whichever have you, if you ask the question, do you have any of your family in medicine? Most likely there is. There's an uncle, there's a grandfather, a grandmother, a sister, a cousin, somebody's a nurse or a physician or a surgeon. There's usually some type of ties, usually individuals that have the aptitude to be successful in engineering, similar as you would see in law or finance, or usually in medicine. If you're going to compete with some of the top talent, you have to be able to aptly describe how your technology impacts healthcare. If you have a device that's for lung bronchoscopy, you have to showcase how building this technology will save lives. If it's for some facet of pediatric care, you have to showcase how your technology will help save children. You have to be able to play into that part of your skill set. Your engineering aptitude will help the betterment of healthcare versus going and building, the newest version of Slack or the newest LED light up keyboard. You have to show them a reason why, because in reality, the way I would look at it is if I'm going to take this opportunity in medtech versus the FAANG company, it's probably going to cost me $15,000 to $20,000 a month to take this healthcare opportunity. You have to make that make sense mentally. It's not always about money, but.
Yeah, but even that, what are your top tips for salary negotiations?
Honestly, there's enough public data. I mean, Crunchbase, Bloomberg, Pittsburgh, you can understand a company's situation. If you're interviewing with a startup, first do your homework to understand what is their current funding situation. Are they producing revenue? Who are some of the other key strategics on board? That way you can have a sense of what potentially you're asking for. If it's a global enterprise company, I mean, you can base everything, well, this is what this FAANG company is offering, or what any other, company with a very strong, strong commercial side. You have to understand, I mean, as much due diligence in terms of marketing. In terms of negotiation, I mean, look, if you're a strong Python or C++, you can do whatever you want. You know that. You have to understand, if it makes interest for you, what do you feel, is this about money, or is this just you want to come build this technology? If it's in terms of money, just make sure that there's clear data to the interviewee, the team, whoever, that listen, I'm looking at 4, 5, 6, 7 different opportunities. I have colleagues that are receiving X or N number of compensation packages. This is really what I'm looking for. If you can meet me, fantastic. If it's not, I don't want to waste anybody's time. But do your research. Always do your research.
But would you recommend negotiation for someone who is just fresh out of grad school and just started?
Honestly, I remember this when I was recruiting initially for Verb Surgical. I was going after the PhDs out of Johns Hopkins in the middle of their PhDs, because I knew if I didn't get there then, the intuitive surgical recruiters already beat me there. And half the time we were arm wrestling already all the way through. But even at the academic level, once you're receiving, they'll say, well, you don't really, it has nothing to do with your level of experience. It has to do with what the market dictates. It's the same thing as real estate. If you know that a master's in computer science may earn $80 to $90 to $100,000, and obviously location depending, you have to be able to come to the table with that, with the confidence to say, look, this is where I want to be, or I'm going to move elsewhere. If ultimately if there's a logistics scenario, if you have to stay in a certain area and they're demanding on site, there's a million different factors that'll come into place. The ultimate component is confidence and understanding where exactly you're in real time, what exactly the market's dictating for your specific skill set or engineering background from your degree.
Yeah, so my next question to you, Wesley, is that what are the top skills that medtech companies or surgical robotics companies are looking for?
Everything's shifting digital. I think the biggest component we're seeing now, like Stryker bought Voicera Communications for a little over $3 billion. The narrative now is shifting that medical device companies are becoming data companies. How exactly, data science, data engineers, cloud architects, building technology or infrastructure that can make patient data more accessible, understanding EHR implementation, software that's surrounding this, whether it be Java, JavaScript, or working in different types of cloud architecture like AWS or Azure, or even things of nature like CI/CD platforms. I know that could be automation for build and release, or testing components. Those are going to be the highly desired skill set, versus there's still going to be a need for C or C++, like embedded systems or hardware centric software languages. But I think more now the cloud and digital languages are going to be the most highly desirable now and probably over the next 3 years.
How about robotics skills?
It depends. It depends on the concept that they're looking for. I mean, traditionally robotic, or like collaborative robotic arm based surgical technologies, it's working in ROS, understanding obviously like either C++ or Java, whatever type of integration languages, or C#, being able to, I think more so being able to implement control system algorithms. That's this typically those are the C++ language, understanding MATLAB, understanding I don't know, even this isn't so much coding, but this is probably more on the mechanical side, but I'm seeing a healthy need for FEA specialists. This is a little bit different of a realm, but something very interesting. Individuals that will, like systems modeling, multi-dynamic or multi-body dynamic systems modeling for mechatronic systems. And that's typically like either an ANSYS or Simulink, and I mean, they're, again, not having a CS background, I don't want to fail at trying to speak the robotics language, but I'm seeing a lot of these type of needs for different companies, even relevant towards software. But I think everything is shifting towards more digital-based product offerings.
So would you hire someone who has no experience with FDA design control process? And then do you see that as a potential disadvantage for someone who just started or just graduated?
I don't see that as a disadvantage at all. And I think in some case, obviously it's going to be it's going to be highly preferred if it's a startup that's somebody that walks in the door that understands all medical device software systems design controls from 60601 to 62304, et cetera. But ideally having somebody who doesn't, who might be a blank slate versus somebody who's coming from a potentially not a well-structured quality management system, so you don't have to reteach over wrong things. That could be an option, but in reality, the market's so competitive. I was recruiting out of John Deere to find good C++ engineers. And I mean, that was just because they could work remotely out of Iowa.
Yeah, let's talk about degree here, Wesley, a little bit. So you mentioned that you had to reach out to some of the PhD students at Johns Hopkins for Verb Surgical, but in general, do medtech companies or surgical robotics companies prefer to hire people with advanced degrees like master's or PhD, or they prefer to hire people with a bachelor's degree but a few years of experience? I guess the question is advanced degree or experience.
Most companies, if they're building the technology versus the more conceptual research, they'll opt towards a bachelor or master's because they want individuals who won't get too far tied down into the analytical research component. If this technology is literally a sketching on a white piece of paper, you're going to want the PhD who can actually bring the analytical model or the analytical concept to at least to prototype. If you have someone at prototype, you need the actual development engineers, typically the bachelor or the masters, that will just, excuse my language, get shit done. And I mean, it's something that I've heard quite commonly. Yes, a lot of the PhDs, they have fantastic software development skills, but they don't want to do that. They want to do the control systems modeling and design versus the actual, the actual software development component of the project. So I typically see more of an interest towards a bachelor master's with industry experience, somebody who has been through code reviewing process, who understands that, it might be some difficult conversations. It might not go the way you hope. And somebody that, would understand, okay, we have timelines. We have the conceptual, we have the concept done. We have the prototype done. We need to get this into a finished developed product.
But how about what school you went to? Do they care about where you got your degree from?
Wherever.
So it is more about the skill set than where you got your degree from, right?
Obviously, there's two sides. The degree, if you have a premier program, like if you have a CS degree from Hopkins or Carnegie Mellon or Illinois or Champaign-Urbana or Stanford, that is a massive positive, because especially as in terms of a startup, you can make that announcement on LinkedIn or on social media or whatever have you, that we are bringing this heavy hitter. We now have Stanford level computer science horsepower in our organization. The reality is the directors of software or the CTO is going to do their assessment. How well does this individual understand the syntax? How well do they understand data structures and algorithms? That could come from anywhere. I mean, with Verb Surgical, I placed a senior embedded software engineer with an oceanography degree. Software development, you can learn inherently. And there's a lot of individuals that I've spoken to without a degree that have they understood the math, they understood the language development, and they succeeded. And now they realize the market is so hyper competitive.
All right, so let's change gears and talk about work settings. So next question is, startups or established companies?
It really depends. I would say your financial situation. If you have the bandwidth, if you have the bandwidth to join a startup, go for it. Do it now before you're married and you have kids and you have, a laundry list of bills that you're responsible for every single month. Corporate organizations, they're going to definitely provide you the security. They're going to provide you a paycheck every day. The reality of some of these corporations, depending on the project that you work on, unless it's sustainment for a well-mature product, a product that's, continue year over year to do well commercially. If even some of these advanced research programs within a large scale, like a Medtronic or a J&J, who's to say that program won't get shelved or won't get cut? So, I mean, in terms of the argument, well, a startup has more security than some of these enterprise level organizations. It all depends on the type of project that you're working on. If you're looking something primarily for security, if it's not, I just got the degree because I want a high paying job and my focus is just having a family and living a normal life, I would definitely look towards some of your slower moving, larger global Fortune 500 companies that, work on a sustainment program. So you'll have the security like a Lockheed Martin or maybe like a GE. maybe not so much a G, but you have an idea what I mean. But if you're earlier in your career and you have the bandwidth, shoot for the startup. And I mean, in terms of digital health, I mean, or digital medtech, the amount of funding that's going around right now, you're never going to see a better area to get into an organization, even if it's not 100% buttoned up and sewn up. Even if there are some issues, they will still get a massive amount of funding because there's this massive craze towards it.
Yeah, very good points there, Wesley. So thank you for that. So here's another popular question for you, Wesley. Staying with a company for a long time, maybe 5 or 10 years, or switching jobs every 2 or 3 years?
The ranges that we've seen in terms of merit increase for organizations, enterprise level or whatever have you, historically have been between 3 and 5%. I know that there's significant adjustment because inflation's gone up for 7%, but historically, if you're making 100K at XYZ company, most likely at your merit review, you'll probably see a 3.5 to 5K a bump in salary, bump in compensation. The data that I've seen in terms of changing positions, individuals who are moving, it's typically between a 14 and 16% increase in salary. Now, granted, the concern on being labeled a job hopper is being thrown out the window almost daily. The reality is it's a candidate-driven market. Go where you're going to see the best compensation, do the best for your family, but also, I mean, you have to personally weigh those options and how you feel that does make you look. So I do know that there are companies that still have a negative look at somebody who's had 5 different positions in 4 years. The reality is you can't shake that. If you put yourself in their shoes, if it was your company and you're looking at somebody that you need to hire, but look, you've been with 4 companies in 3 years, how do I know you're going to be with my company for more than 2 months? And their answer is you don't. I don't know how you can't bring, it's extremely difficult to bring somebody on and potentially lose that individual. For those individuals that are at a senior level, several years of experience, that are interested in playing the market, I would recommend reaching out, put yourself available, let people know that you are interviewing, bring it back to your company and say, listen, just to let you know, I've interviewed with 2 other companies and I'm now in offer discussions for a salary that's potentially 15 to 20% above what I'm making now. I love this company. I want to stay here, but I'd like to know if you're able to at least match this, at least do something to keep me motivated to stay here versus these other organizations. I mean, the managers are already expecting it.
But money aside, what's your recommendation or advice when it comes to career growth? So should someone stay with a company for a long time or seek opportunities elsewhere, again, when it comes to career growth?
Would have very clear discussions with your supervisors about what your succession plan is. If you first make a plan for your own to know, I want to be staff or principal or R&D director or whatever have you, make that plan of where you want to achieve in your career and have that communication with your supervisor to say, what are exactly the steps that I need to take? And the next year I would like to see myself at this level. What do I need to do to prove that, to make that happen? You do your analysis, understand, are these positions open within this company or do they require relocation? Do you think there's a realistic chance you can reach that within your company? You may do the homework and find out, well, the answer is no. And that may essentially make your decision for you to say, I can work here for the next 3 years and I won't grow anywhere. I need to make that decision to look outward. And unfortunately, unless your supervisor can say, we'll find a way, we don't want to lose you. If they don't actually have that growth for you, that answer is right there in front of you.
So Wesley, the next question for you is, as you know, these days, the job market is very hot and engineers, especially software engineers, get approached by recruiters on LinkedIn a lot. So I get approached by recruiters almost every week. So should they pick up the next call, reply to the next email, even if they're happy with their current job, current company, or should they just ignore the next call or the next email altogether?
For whatever type of opportunity, do your homework on whoever sent you the message. If it's somebody within the actual organization from HR, it's worth your time to check it out. Just make a connection. And then if you want to shoot them a CV or you want to just open a line of communication for potential opportunities. If they're doing something interesting in your field, if they're building, whatever have you, like Boston Scientific building a robot for surgery, like, hey, maybe I want to check that out. If it's from a third-party recruiter like myself, do your background on them. Have they actually worked in the space that you've worked in, or were they literally handing out gym towels 3 months ago? I tell you this all the time, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but the more that LinkedIn becomes Instagram, and it's becoming Instagram, the more fly-by-night recruiters that there will be out there with no whatsoever experience versus just a script that they're handed to by their supervisor. Do your homework on who's reaching out to you. If it looks interesting, if it looks bona fide, follow up, open a line of communication. You don't have anything to do. If they get pushy, if they start saying, if they use aggressive or abrasive language, they're done. You never need to talk to them again. But if NASA JPL reaches out to you, take the call. How many times have I asked you? How many messages have I sent you?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the very first time we talked, Wesley, was back in 2017, where you were recruiting for Verb Surgical. And I got to tell you that I was impressed by how responsive you were back then. You were available almost 24/7. I would text you or message you early in the morning, nights, like late at night, or even weekends, and you would get back to me in a few hours. And on top of that, you are very knowledgeable. I remember back then we were talking about like inverse kinematics, forward kinematics, PID controller, like C++, and all of those very technical terms when it came to robotics. And I was impressed by your knowledge, and I thought I'll share that with you today.
I really appreciate that. I really do. It's just something I fell into, but I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. I know it's, to any recruiters ever had to recruit into medical robotics or complex robotics, that some of these searches can drive you out of your mind, but actually seeing the technology, you learn it because you actually understand what the technology does. Like, how do you build autonomous systems that perform surgery? And I mean, they're seeing where it does go now, or seeing where it's shifting now into more digital applications. You kind of understand where the puck is going. You establish relationships. I mean, the same reason, luckily doing it now or doing it back in 2015, the relationships that you were reaching out to individuals, reaching out to folks during academia, that is, you have to understand, even if it's just helping them put them a resume together or just giving them kind of lay of the land into different geographical areas. I mean, those are people that you'll come back to when they're working at Apple or when they're working at Google. And, you can at least tap them on the shoulder for either their advice or for networking for other opportunities.
Yeah, and the other thing I was fascinated by, Wesley, was your knowledge of like work visa and visa types, work visa and sponsorships. And you even knew some of the good universities, even in Middle East.
Sharif and Amakabar. Those are just two of them.
There you go. I did not expect you to know those school names.
Gotta know these things. Look, there's a million recruiters out there. There's a million of me. They're going to call every single day. They're going to smile and dial. The difference I hope that I've had that's separated from themselves if I actually do my homework. I remember I was talking to you about that. I was like, the individuals that they get their university from overseas, they find their way through Canada, then they go in through the TN visa, because it will literally shave about 2 to 3 years of the process off. Getting a TN to, there's a whole different conversation for 5 more cups of coffee.
So speaking of visa and sponsorships, are medtech companies willing to sponsor people who graduated here in the US, but they may need a work authorization or work visa to be able to work here in the US?
I think they have to. The startups, I understand it could be challenging. The startups, I know, having resources to invest into, like hiring the Fragment Group or other immigration special legal firms. The other component is you don't have a choice. The reality is to open up that pool for the right level of talent, software, mechanical, even regulatory or legal, or like finance. If you need to bring on the right level of talent, it is an easy investment, and sometimes you don't have a choice. I know companies at a global Fortune 500, over $100 billion a year in global revenue that will not sponsor, that will not even entertain the idea of visa sponsorship, and it boggles my mind. But then I just look at it as like, that's your loss. I understand in government defense. I understand Lockheed. It's a whole different story if you're dealing with this defense secrets or any type of information regarding or attributing to military or U.S. government defense secrets. And the reality, if it's startup or regular companies that are just looking to hire well-talented individuals, engineering or what have you, you have to. It's not a maybe, it's an absolute must that you have to open your door to H-1B sponsorship, TN sponsorship. I know the J2 or L1 or L2 is going to get a little bit challenging, but at least consult. If you're watching this and you own an organization, you're having trouble hiring, consult with some type of legal expertise or immigration firm on what the actual costs are. It's not as hard as you think.
And my last question for you, Wesley, is being a generalist or a specialist?
Depending on the question, you're talking about towards medical technology, you're talking towards engineering or
Engineering.
understood. I would recommend anybody in an engineering position, R&D or whatever have you, go to get an MBA. First off, make sure you get if you have your growth trajectory, if you're looking to stay as a principal engineer, if all you want to do is just be on the early stage design side, and there's some that do that, 25 years, they just want to build the newest and greatest technologies and just call it a day. The majority of what we're seeing, I would highly recommend some type of MBA that gives you structure into executive management, operations management. I would say focus on engineering in terms of being a specialist. Look to get into more systems level engineering, whatever discipline you may have. It's mechanical, electrical, software. Understand the holistic system approach of how exactly your specific skill set, whether it's software or mechanical, integrates into that platform. Then take it a step further and get on the business side. Understand program management, understand the product marketing side, or product management side. That is probably going to give you the best trajectory to get into the C-suite. If your ultimate goal is to be a CEO of an organization and to rise up through a company infrastructure, I don't know why this is, and I'm still analyzing it myself, but I've seen struggles with individuals that were primarily technical. Making that jump from CTO to CEO has been a challenge. You have to have more commercial experience, operation experience, marketing and strategy combined with your engineering experience if ultimately you do want to be president, CEO of an organization. That help?
All right, thank you very much, Wesley, for your time today. I truly enjoyed talking to you, and I learned a lot from this conversation. So do you have any final advice, final tips when it comes to career growth?
I say just take it one day at a time. I mean, I know the Silicon Valley is to move fast and break things. Take your time, learn about what you actually have passion in, learn what you want to do, what you want to see yourself, push yourself to do something you're unfamiliar with or scared of. But honestly, just take it one day at a time. Don't try to go from 2-year electrical engineer to CEO over a week.